Is the house you are thinking about buying haunted? How would you know? Today, I'm going to be going over steps you can take to make sure that the house you're buying is not haunted and doesn't have any unwanted residents when you move in. This is going to be a good one. This is Monday Mornings with Mark. Hi, I'm your host, Mark J. Schmidt of RE/MAX Country and MoveMeMark.com, where I help you get the most out of the real estate market and your home. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and make sure you like us on Facebook so you don't miss out. So, back in 2015, I put out a video about how to tell if you're buying a haunted house. This video actually wound up being one of my most popular videos. It's got thousands of views, and people from all over the country have contacted me asking questions about what I talked about in that video. So I thought it would be a great idea to do an update to that video. I've got some more things you can do, steps you can take to make sure that the house you're buying isn't haunted, and I think you're going to really appreciate what you're hearing here. These are some really good steps you can take. Listen, whether you believe that a house is haunted or not, a house that is believed to be haunted can still carry a stigma and be difficult to sell later on. So even if you don't believe in haunted houses, you still want to listen and find out what you can do to protect yourself down the road. So let's get started. So the first thing to consider when you're trying to determine if a house is haunted is, what is the location? There are certain locations that will make a home a better candidate to be haunted than others. So for example, if the home is close to a cemetery, if the home is next to a former battlefield where people may have died, areas like this, wherever you have something that could either be a tragic death or a lot of deaths, you could have a candidate for a haunted house there. So you definitely want to take a look at the location. This leads us to our second thing to look at, which is the age of the home. Is the home over 100 years old? Now, a home that's over 100 years old has a few different things going on for it. First of all, a lot of people could have lived in that house. Also, many, many years ago, remember when people died, they wouldn't necessarily go to a funeral home to have the wake and greet people. They would have the wake right in the house. So it's possible that, someone was holding a wake in the home that you're considering buying. So always consider the age when thinking about whether a home might be haunted. Now, number 3, when you go into the home, how does the home feel? I've shown a lot of homes since I started selling real estate in 2002. And it's funny, you go into some homes, and listen, I don't know if these homes are actually haunted or not, but I have gone into homes and you walk in the door and you're immediately struck by this sense of dread, this heavy feeling, this oppression that you just can't put a finger on it, but you don't feel good being in that house. So how the home feels can be really important. Now, another thing is, as you're going through the home, does the home have cold spots? If there's a cold spot in a house, it could be an indicator that there's a supernatural presence there. So if you notice that the room is warm over here and inexplicably cold over here, take note of that. That could be a sign that something paranormal is going on. Now, number 4, is the price of the home too good to be true? If you see a home that's absolutely gorgeous and, compared to the homes around it, it's at an absolute steal, there may be something going on there. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. I have all my clients, all my listing clients, my sellers, I have them fill out what's called a seller's property condition disclosure statement. This basically goes over all the different aspects of the house. How old is the roof, the hot water heater, the furnace, things like that. There's nothing on that disclosure about the house being haunted. And in most states, I think there's only 4 states where it's necessary. In most states, you don't need to disclose if your house is haunted because you really can't prove that the house is haunted in the first place. So you do want to ask. Now, while they don't have to come out and disclose it, if you ask, hey, is there any supernatural presence in the house? They should be honest with you and tell you if they have experienced anything supernatural. Now, here's an interesting story. Back in, I believe it was 1990, 1991, there was a guy named Jeffrey Stambovsky. He wanted to buy this old Victorian home in Nyack, New York. The seller never told him that the house was haunted, even though she had gone and sold the rights to her story to Reader's Digest years before that. Jeffrey Stambovsky happens to find out from a neighbor or someone, I forget who, but he finds out that this house has a history of being haunted. He tries to get out of the contract. They hadn't closed yet. The owner wouldn't let him out, and they wind up going to court. And eventually the court agreed that since this woman sold her story to Reader's Digest, stating that the house was haunted, she couldn't then keep that information from him. So make sure you ask. If you feel that there might be something up, ask, hey, is there anything supernatural going on here? You may look crazy to the seller, but listen, the seller's most interested in selling their home. And if there is no supernatural activity, they'll just laugh it off and they'll answer your question. So when in doubt, ask. Now this leads me to my fifth tip, which is do an online search. Search the address of the property online and see what comes up. A lot of times if something terrible has happened in a home, there will be a news article about it, so you can find out if anything grisly had happened in the home, if there were other reports or stories about a haunting going on there. So definitely do your research online. This leads me to number 6, which is talk to the neighbors. Listen, the neighbors are going to know if something has gone on in that house. So feel free, talk to the neighbors. Ask them about the neighborhood. How do they like the neighborhood? How do they like these neighbors that are selling their home? If they say, listen, we never see them and we hear a lot of screaming late at night, that might be a good indication that the house is haunted. However, most times they're not going to say stuff like that. Hopefully they're not going to have a reason to say stuff like that. But what you want to do is talk to them. They'll be able to give you some information about that house that you may not be able to find out online. Now, my 7th tip for you is something that came in actually really handy for a gentleman from Illinois who contacted me about a haunted house. So a few years ago, my wife and I were going out to lunch, and I got a text from this person in Illinois. He said, "Are you the haunted house expert?" I was intrigued, so I said, "Yes, I am." And he basically went on to tell me that he and his family were buying this house. It was a vacant property. It had been taken back from the bank. And he had just driven by the house and took a picture of the outside of the house. And when he looked at the picture, he saw faces in the window. This was a vacant house. There should not have been faces in the window. So he reached out to me to see if there was anything he could do to get rid of those faces in the window once they bought. And I told him, listen, sometimes there are things you can do like doing a house blessing, burning sage, that's known as smudging the home. You might need an exorcism. So there are things you can do. And what I told him to do is, I said, there's a website you can go to where you can actually find out if anyone has died in the house. And the website is www.diedinhouse.com. And I think for just a small fee, they will tell you if anyone had died in that property. Well, this gentleman from Illinois went there and he found out that yes, indeed, someone had died in the house. So diedinhouse.com is a fantastic resource if you're wondering if anyone had passed away in the home. Now listen, just because someone passes away in a home doesn't mean that the house is necessarily haunted. But sometimes people get creeped out by stuff like that. So if you're that type of person and you want to find out, diedinhouse.com is the place to go. My final tip for you is, if you're really interested in finding out if there's any supernatural activity happening in the home you're buying, you can actually invest in equipment that can show you if there is any activity going on while you're in the house. So the first thing you can buy is called an EMF meter. EMFs are electromagnetic frequencies. And the reasoning goes that the electromagnetic frequencies in a house will stay pretty level. There are certain devices in your home, maybe a microwave, for example, that will cause the levels to go higher. But typically they'll stay pretty level. And if they start going up, it could be an indicator that there's a supernatural presence in the house. Now, another thing you can use is a digital recorder or an EVP app, which you can get for your phone. Now, an EVP is known as electronic voice phenomenon, and that's where you start recording in a room. You're in the house you're thinking about buying. you start recording, and even though the room is quiet, you just say things like, is there anyone here? Is there anyone with me right now? And after you ask a few questions, you go back and listen to it. Sometimes if there's a spirit in the room, the reasoning goes that they will be able to talk on the recording and you'll be able to hear them. Sometimes they'll say something innocuous like, hello, or I'm here. And other times you'll hear things like, get out. That's a clue that you should not be buying that house. But if you're interested in EVPs, you can look on YouTube and just search EVP, ghosts, and you'll be able to find plenty of videos with examples of that. But the EMF meter and something to record EVPs with are another great way that you can determine if there are ghosts in the house you're thinking about buying. Now listen, if you have questions about buying a haunted house or selling a haunted house or about real estate in general, there's a fantastic resource. It's my website. You can find me at www.MoveMeMark.com. Thanks so much for watching. If you missed our last episode, I've got it right here for you. And here's another episode that YouTube thinks you should watch. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that circle and subscribe so you don't miss out. And I'll see you next time for more Monday Mornings with Mark. You have a great week.